Good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have this conversation. David provided some context of the different types of human capital management technology that's out there. So the conversation today with these esteemed panelists on the floor today is really just about how technology is infused within human capital management and how technology is actually going to enable HR operations. So I'd actually first like to start a little bit with just some quick introductions, just to hear from each of our panelists a little bit about their history and their role within human capital management. So I'd like to start with Kim.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Kimberly Holden. I go by Kim, and I currently work with the Office of Personnel Management as the Deputy Associate Director for Talent Acquisition and Workforce Shaping. And in essence, what that means is I have responsibility for government-wide hiring policy to include classification, qualification, and assessment policy. I'll have 35 years of federal service in August, and I've been in human capital, HR, personnel management, then all of the different names that is changed from all of my entire career.
Awesome.
So,
my name is Michelle Solis. I'm the director for the Defense Civilian Personnel Advisory Service. I have been in that position for 2.5 months. Prior to that, I was in the Air Force for 34 years, so just about the same amount of time. In my current role, we develop policy for employment, compensation, for benefits. We do wage surveys for the federal government. We do planning and accountability, strategic workforce planning, HR analytics, and we also do assessments for the HR community within the Department of Defense.
Hi, I'm Roland Edwards. I'm currently the Deputy Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know that I can keep track of my years. I lose track of time. So, but I have had the pleasure of working in small, medium, and large agencies at this point. So it's been a really nice ride to see the perspective of all of those different types of agencies across the federal government. And again, I am just happy to be here, happy to actually share and to learn. So I find that these panels are always interesting. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thank you. So just as a starting point, really want to get to understand a little bit about the fact that we've talked about technology being infused in so many aspects of government operations, including human capital management. So would love to hear some of your perspectives, anecdotes, examples of how technology is changing the way that you recruit, retain, manage your workforce. So Roland, I'd love to start with you.
Of course you would. We've had an agreement that you would start with Michelle first. So, the first is that I heard it on the panel before that technology is an enabler, right? So technology shouldn't drive your processes. It should be what helps you. At the Department of Homeland Security, one of the things that we found is that we are such a large agency that one size does not fit all, right? And so that's one of the things that we had to learn pretty quickly. One of the challenges there, though, is that you also don't want to support multiple systems that you're now having to support across different platforms. And it's all the same system. So you buy one from one vendor, but then you replicate it at different components. And it's replicated differently in each component. So then you're keeping that instance separately. So we're trying to figure out how, from an HRIT perspective, do we really handle allowing our components to go out and do creative and innovative things, while at the same time being able to establish a common platform across the department to really leverage some of those successful practices that we see in various components across the department as well. We don't want one person to just be flying and then there's another one over here that's just suffering because we haven't had the opportunity to just look across our own department to help one another. And I think that we've been really successful in being able to do that. In terms of how that impacts our outreach, so we've got, we do polygraphs, we do medicals, we have just the regular hiring process, but those are kind of dispersed in each of the components. So how do we help to make sure that we're actually able to do that? Applicants don't want to hear that you're different. They don't want to hear that it takes a long time because you've got a long process. Applicants want a job. They want to get in the door. So ultimately what we're trying to figure out is how do we streamline the process as much as possible, and while we're doing that streamlining, we're also looking at how we're moving towards the next century, right? We're trying to figure out, can we set a model for what hiring should look like in the future. So we have an authority that we're looking at right now, which is pretty innovative, that is looking at how can the civil service actually be reformed, and we're focused specifically on cyber. And that's going to have a lot of enabling technologies that we're just not ready to implement right now, because the systems that we have, and again, you heard that on the previous panel, they're not designed to handle something that's that innovative right now. And so as they're moving, we're moving with them and partnering with other, like OPM, and I know Kim will talk about that as well. So it's a great time to be at DHS. We're doing a lot of exciting, innovative things, and it's just an exciting time.
So we are right in the middle of implementing our core HR in a software as a service as a cloud. We started this process about a year ago. We are currently right in the middle of prototype testing. So we are just starting, really, this journey that you're talking about. So one of the things that we're trying to do, and what are we trying to achieve, today in the Department of Defense, we have 6 separate databases for civilian personnel. So we have one for Army, we have one for Air Force, we have one for Navy, etc. And those configurations are a little bit different. And as you can imagine, when we have employees that move from one service to another, we don't have a single employee record. That's one of the things that we're trying to achieve, is to get us to a single employee record. Because a lot of our employees do spend their careers within the Department of Defense. The other thing that we've got is several bolt-on systems for competencies, for performance management, for talent management, for our senior executives service. We have about a dozen of those. So if you can imagine having a dozen bolt-on systems associated with 6 separate databases, we have just a very fragmented process. So you're doing some work over here, then you're turning around and you're keying work in over here. We do not have an integrated end-to-end process within civilian personnel, and that is one of the things that we are also trying to achieve. A key goal for us is end-to-end processes supported by the technology. And that is a key element for us. We're working very hard with OPM to make sure that we've got interconnectivity between our software as a service in the cloud instance and USA Staffing and EOPF. Again, we want to make sure that the data flows. We've got to have authoritative data as we go forward. And that is key. And finally, we want to make sure that we are leveraging technology for time to hire. So we've had a series of workshops that use the OPM 80-day model as the basis for that. I think every agency could say time to hire is probably one of their key issues, that one of the things that everybody is got some interest in. That is certainly the case within the Department of Defense. One of the things that we can't do today, because we have every separate agency, again, service, whether it's our Air Force, whether it's Army, whether it's Navy, whether it's the Fourth Estate, capturing that data in a little bit different way. So those workshops that we've been doing is how do we capture the information the same way, so that we can truly measure how we're doing, time to hire, and then identify what are the root causes that we need to address. And that's one of the things that we think that leveraging technology will enable us to do.
Absolutely. And Kim, would love to hear your perspective actually talking about OPM and talking about how process is really enabled by technology. Would love to hear your perspective from OPM and time to hire and all those aspects of.
So from OPM's standpoint, we are, all of the things that the agencies are focused on are actually part of the President's management agenda, which we have a lead on with regard to transforming how government works. And so there are three prongs: the information technology modernization, data transparency and accountability, and of course building the 21st century workforce, which is one of the very key components. So we are working with agencies, first of all, looking for ideas of what agencies are doing, and then trying to figure out how OPM can be of help to agencies. OPM is looking at different ways also that we can use technology internally to our agency with different processes, but of course we are not there yet. We are just getting started, but we do have systems that we have responsibility for, like USA Jobs and USA Staffing. USA Jobs has grown from the traditional job board, and it's continuing to grow. So we're continuing to make advances there, making it more agile, so that way applicants have a way of actively searching for employment across the federal government. Is it perfect? No, but it is. It's tremendously better than what it used to be. And with regard to time to hire, we have just completed human capital reviews for all 24 CHICO Act agencies. And so what that is, OPM goes out and we sit with agencies and we listen to the progress that agencies have made and the advancements that they've made in technology using robotic processing and using artificial intelligence, but also how they've been able to advance their programs. And time to hire was one of the things that I think one of the items that appeared on the list of all 24 agencies. One of the things, the issues that they were grappling with. And so that was a key indicator to myself and my team that we're working with to say, okay, maybe it's time for us to take a look at time to hire, how agencies are capturing time to hire, what they're reporting, and should it be consistent across the board, because one thing that affects DOD may not impact FAA, it may not impact DHS. And then we also have all of these different hiring authorities that I know OPM has been gracious enough to give out. But then does that mean that you count time to hire for direct hire authority the same way you would for if you're hiring a person under a Schedule A, for example? Those are two very different authorities, and so counting your time to hire will be different. So we are actually taking a look at how agencies look at time to hire, how they should be measuring, and we're looking at that as well as the 80-day hiring model. And those are just a couple of things that we're doing, but we're happy to sit at the table with agencies and have partnerships with them because we want to be able to do this together as a whole government.
So I do agree with you. I think that one of the biggest prevalent issues right now with human capital management is obviously time to hire, recruiting and hiring. How are we getting in the right workforce within the federal government? So I'd love to hear your perspective. Roland, you did mention a little bit about the fact of applicant expectations, right? What are those expectations we're seeing from the marketplace? Could you elaborate a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of demands from the applicant space right now from people who are looking for seeking jobs out in the federal market?
So we have so many diverse occupations within DHS, and trying to reach out and tap those different markets is difficult for any agency, and especially one that has all of them. So whether it's our cyber workforce, where you've got folks who don't necessarily want a career in federal service, they want to be able to come in, do great work, give back a little bit, and then go back out to the private sector. So how do you attract and tap that market, and how do you make it easy for them to do that? Then you've got the other side who maybe are looking for law enforcement jobs, but they actually want to see mobility in the law enforcement jobs. So how do they come in to be a TSA FAMS and then go to Secret Service? And how are we making it clear that they can do that to show them that career path on the front end? And then you've got just the base general occupations, general support occupations, and all of these are just very different audiences, very different ways of reaching out to those groups of folks. But the one thing that's consistent across them is that they don't have time to wait for you. They want to look for the jobs the way they want to look for the jobs, and the job has to be interesting to them in what they see. When we did a few focus groups, I think OPM actually hosted one of them. It was enlightening to show kind of the 30 to 60 something crowd that, Indeed and how it actually shows up in some of the job boards and what comes up above the fold that applicants see. And you look at that and you're like, yeah, I wouldn't apply for that job either. There's nothing in that job that would make me click through to go apply for it. And so really trying to take a step back, look and see what that looks like. We've tried our best to, we've brought all of our cool toys and done joint hiring events. And so, technology is infused throughout all of that. We've tried across the department to look at how do we streamline the process. So when an applicant comes in to maybe one of our job fairs, how do we get them from point A of being interested in us to actually getting them in the door as quickly as possible? So maybe we don't have to send them somewhere else to do their drug test and then somewhere else to do their security to start their paperwork. What if you did it all at one place? So making sure that you're looking at how do all those systems integrate to be able to get someone from an applicant tracking system at the door to actually getting them interviewed, getting a selection, getting them into all of those processes, and actually giving them a TJO when they walk out the door. That's an amazing incentive, and that's an amazing story to be able to tell. So that's what we're trying to do. So we're doing that in very niche areas. So we've had a veterans hiring event. We've had an event that was focused on women in law enforcement. We've had a cyber hiring event, and they've all been very successful because we try to really implement some of those strategies.
Absolutely. And Michelle, one aspect of this is we've talked a little bit about the external candidate side, right? But talking about how these technology impacts are within the organization, so managers, labor organizations, the actual business, right? Can you talk a little bit about how you've handled the impacts of technology to the mission side and some of the techniques and things that HCM leaders like these folks could hear from?
So again, very early in the process for our deployment for what we're calling D-Charms, our SaaS in the cloud implementation. But I will tell you, in our prototype testing, which is ongoing right now, one of the things that was very interesting to us, a bit of a surprise, probably shouldn't have been, is the folks that we've had engaged with this effort from the very beginning. Again, we've been doing this for a year. They have been involved with the sprints. They have been involved with the demos. They have been involved with the design, right, and configuration of the system. When we put them in front of this software as a service in the cloud instance, for them to test, for this prototype to say, is this going to work for us? They were unable to execute. It was such a difference from what we had in the past that when we put them in front of it, it was so different they could not immediately begin to test, even though they've been with this project for a year. So that is a change management issue that we are going to have to address. We now know that we are going to have to do training before testing. We know now that we are going to have to go out much further than we expected within the HR workforce for training, as well as managers, as well as they do national consultations with the unions. So timing for national consultations is when we understand what the differences are. We've got to understand and be able to explain, here's what we have today, here's what we have tomorrow. That's when we can go to the national unions. We have not done that yet. We don't have that information yet. With managers and with our civilian personnel experts, our subject matter experts, our policy leaders, we are going to begin doing demonstrations through our governance processes. So we have governance processes with civilian personnel HR. We have governance processes with our functional leadership, regardless of functional category. And we will begin, after we finish prototype testing, we will begin that effort of socializing, making sure that there's an understanding of what is available, and bring them in to help us with change management.
Sure, absolutely. So it definitely sounds like, to reiterate those aspects of technology as an enabler. There's aspects of change management, stakeholder engagement that are critical to actually making the technology implementation a success. So just one last question to kind of wrap up before we take any audience questions is, I'd love to get your perspective on, we've heard a little bit about the change management side, but are there any additional lessons learned that you would say that you have from implementing HCM technologies, or things that you would like to share in terms of things that you wish you knew before you started the implementation? And because I've started with everyone else, Kim, I'll start with you for this question.
Well, I guess from the perspective of the federal workforce, and just preparing the federal workforce for what's to come, there are some things that, some steps that I think agencies can take to, while they're in the process of establishing their AI and RPA processes, and making sure the workforce is ready. We have a lot of employees that will be afraid of what's to come when you talk about infusing technology, and how will that technology change the way I work? Will it impact the work that I do? Will it impact my grade? Will it impact my career path? And so we also have to look at, with regard to that, we have to look at how we take care of the workforce by thinking about ways to reskill and upskill the workforce. There may be some positions that do go away because of the implementation of technology, but then what's the next step for that employee, in making sure that agencies are transparent in those discussions that they have with the workforce, that they communicate just every day if they have to, but the communication has to be ongoing and it has to be constant. And working with partners, your labor partners, to make sure that the union is aware of what's going to be happening and what steps the agencies are going to take. Those are some of the things that we, from an OPM standpoint, that we see are going to be critical, in addition to preparing supervisors and managers also for that next step of what's going to be next for those employees with regard to their career path, the duties that they have to perform now if technology is going to be taking over, but also looking to see that there are some bright lights in the room as far as in different things, that skills that people may have and passions that they may have that can be driven to another part of the organization, which they can be upskilled or reskilled to do something else. But just being prepared for the change and keeping pace with the change. And then again, being transparent and open with the communication with the workforce.
Absolutely. Roland, anything to add in terms of lessons learned?
Yeah, so as much as it burns me to have to agree with everything that Kim said, I have to agree with everything that she just said. There's another.
You don't have to.
There's another side as well, is that in the agency, the HR community sometimes will not take ownership of your HR IT. And we have to take ownership of our HRIT portfolio. We can't hand that over to the information technology side of the house in order for them to implement it on our behalf. It's just something that we know the requirements, and sometimes we think that just because we've handed them a document with some requirements on it, we're expecting a system to come back that fully functions the way that we need it to function, and we don't give up our time to actually test the system along the way and to be a part of the creative process of building that system. We know our community better than anyone else knows our community, and we have got to own it. I think that that's one of the challenges that we had internally for a while, and that's one of the reasons why we had a few stumbles with our HRIT portfolio for a while. But it's something that, especially with our Chico that's on board now, Angie Bailey, we were actually able, we were like, hey, what are we doing? We have got to own this. We have got to be an integral part of it. We've got to co-lead this with our CIO partners. And that's the other thing, is that we have a really strong partnership across the entire management directorate. So if you do not have that partnership, I challenge you to go get it right now. Like, that should be the first thing that you do when you leave this room and this conference today, is if you don't have a strong partnership established with your procurement officer, with your CIO, with your security officer, because all of those things are what are going to make your program even stronger. And so that's what we're finding. There are things that they're going to help us to be able to navigate, and there are things that we're going to have to push them on, because there are things that we know we need for our community. And so that, for me, that would be the parting shot that I would leave with everyone.
No, it's a fantastic place to kind of end with some of our questions. Are there any audience questions?
One over here.
Oh, yes.
Right there.
Oof. Yes.
We'll hear you. Just pick up.
So my question for you, you guys talk a lot about like the end-to-end processes in terms of management of HR. I actually work at an agency that has a recruitment branch that functions, or journey of HR within?
So one of the things that we've got within the department, and it is not across the board, so it's pockets of excellence, definitely. But we use social media. And so there is one of our services out there who uses LinkedIn on a multi-times-a-day basis to identify critical hires that we need to advertise for, that advertises hiring events, and they have over 50,000 followers. So that's, from my perspective, extraordinarily significant. Where we need to get to, every single person has got an iPhone that they can easily work, right? We have got to get to the point where, besides things like LinkedIn, we've got mobile capability where we can find jobs across the board, USA Jobs, or on other job sites, Indeed, etc. So I think those are the things we've definitely got to look at how we can be more effective at using social media, and we've got to start to exploit what we can do with mobile.
Are there ways that you integrate recruitment into the HR process? Like,
Absolutely.
I work to find a candidate somewhere, and then the candidate is hired, and
Exactly. So part of what we're doing within the Department of Defense, again, we're starting to exercise new muscles because, again, one of the things that I think that applicants want is they want to be able to talk to somebody, right? So there is some need for some high touch, right? Where you've got HR managers and hiring managers that are working together. We do have quite a few direct hiring authorities. And so how can we work together via LinkedIn? Here's a hiring event. If you want to come on down. Having hiring managers and the HR manager there together to do exactly what we need, which is make sure that the applicants that are coming through the door are qualified. If they are, give them to the hiring manager so that they can do the interview. And if they are good to go, hire them on the spot. And that is, right through the onboarding process. One of the things that we've recently found out that USA Jobs has is a private announcements out there.
Open opportunity.
Yes. And so you can pull them into USA Jobs and through the onboarding process for that end-to-end process. So we're starting to explore how to do that. But I think there's opportunities out there, and for us, we're definitely exercising new muscles.
Anything else to add?
No question here.
Okay.
One more.
Good morning. What is HR doing, or what is OPM going to do to protect the workforce, particularly in your high-tech, like your 2210s or your cybersecurity, your technology-type folks, considering that organizations like, companies like Amazon is going to be building a headquarters here? That means that they're going to be offering a lot more money than the government sector is offering. That means we may be losing a lot of our talent. Mm-hmm. Now, I know at Homeland Security, you guys have some very innovative ways of retaining, such as offering very large retention bonuses. And I know that because my wife works with you. And she's 2210 cybersecurity, and she getting that bonus. I work for DLA. I'm a 2210. I'm not getting anything.
You should go to DHS.
So I'm trying to get a job.
So I think your question
glad
has
that
been
question
answered.
was for Keno.
No, I think you need to recruit this gentleman. I think so. We have been having conversations about this challenge, particularly because Amazon is in the neighborhood, and we know that they will be recruiting. But it's not just Amazon. There are other companies and even agencies that now the government has to compete with. We're now competing with each other, where we have agencies that fear the big DHS because they think that they're going to be the feeder for all the cyber jobs and everyone is going to flock to DHS for cyber positions. But we do have flexibilities in place. Agencies are making requests for different pay flexibilities. We do have other authorities that OPM is actively looking at to figure out how we can balance additional compensation flexibilities to help agencies, because you spend so much time recruiting and so much money recruiting top talent. You want to figure out a way to retain that talent, and to see that talent and that investment walk out the door is not something that we want agencies to be faced with. So we have flexibilities. We have an initiative that we're working on now under the 5392 authority, which is a totally different, it's an authority that's been on the books for us for a long time that we're just using, but it allows us to look at unique qualifications and compensation and determine what occupation that we can kind of pilot to see how we can do compensation and qualifications differently. So we're currently piloting the Economist series as our first step. We have others in the pipeline that we probably want to look at piloting as well, but making sure that agencies have mechanisms in place, different pay flexibilities, hiring flexibilities, because it's not just, it's the money, one thing, but it's also the time that it takes to hire someone, and a good candidate such as yourself doesn't want to wait 5 or 6 months or a year to get on board at DHS. So we've given them flexibility so that Roland can actively recruit you even here, and also offer you that big bonus that your wife is getting. But seriously, we are looking at things like that and discussing them every day, because we know that it hits agencies really hard when they cannot keep top talent. And we do not want our people necessarily to go to Amazon. You have to think about all that are here in federal service. You joined the federal service for a reason, and that's just for the gratification of being a public servant. And we hope that being a public servant is something that drives people to continue to stay in the government. And if you go out to the big companies, there's an opportunity always, hopefully, for people to come back. And that's what we really want to see.
I have a question for OPM.
Oh.
And regarding the transition away from HR University and the need to upskill the workforce in HR, what are OPM's plans to develop competencies and proficiencies in both technology as well as innovative practice?
Okay, so we have transitioned away from HR University into the Federal HR University, Federal HR Institute. FHRI is actually what we have transitioned to. We have 22 staffing courses already developed and ready for people to sign up and register for those courses. We will also be we have introduced a new delegated examining certification program that also includes a 3-day training program, a certification test, and then a recertification after 3 years. So we're developing competencies for each one of the specialty areas: staffing, classification, ER/LR, pay and compensation, performance management, and we're also working to build the rest of the curriculum for those different specialty areas. So the information is on our website. If you Google FHRI or Federal HR Institute, the courses will populate, the registration is there, and we also make opportunities to come to an agency. If you have a large number of employees that you want trained, we will come to agencies to do on-site training as well as the classroom. The Federal HR Institute is not just classroom based, the sessions are also online as well. They're virtual and in person, it's a combination. And some of them are also self-paced.
Can I respond?
But they're no longer free.
They are no longer free, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.